This is such a difficult issue. Not difficult for me to understand, but difficult to communicate to you in a way that's going to be understood because it's such a long, drawn-out thing. You have in your hand a Bible. Maybe you have like I do, the Holy Scully, Schofield's Notes. My hope is built on nothing less than Schofield's Notes and Scripture Press, or Moody Press, I guess. Some of you have the New American Standard. Some of you have the NIV. Some of you have the Amplified Bible. I don't know what all you have. Some of you may even have an old confraternity version or Douay version you got from your Catholic days with the Apocrypha in the middle. You may have a living Bible, which is not a Bible, but a commentary on the Bible, paraphrase. But, there's all kinds of things like that. Some of you have a 1901 American Standard, all these various things, all right? Now, the Bible that you have is it's in our culture, all right? In Latin America, they have a Spanish Bible. And it's going to be translated out of the original languages into Spanish. Okay? In Europe, they're going to have a French one. They're going to have a German one. They're going to have an Italian one. You go to the Orient, they're going to have a Japanese one, a Chinese one, a Korean one. Okay. So these people who come along and say that the King James is the only right Bible, they just don't, that's not even thinking clearly. Because that's an English translation. What are we saying? That's almost like Hitler's doctrine of the supreme race. As if we've got all the corner on all the truth and the rest of the world is limping along without the full revelation. Okay, let me just back up from that by saying this. All the Bibles that we do have are basically translated into the languages in which we read them from manuscripts. The Bible was written in the Old Testament in Hebrew, with the exception of several passages in Aramaic, which is a Hebrew type language. The New Testament is written entirely in Greek, not classical Greek like Caesar's Gallic Wars, but Koine or Common Greek, which is a street Greek. So, what we have to do then to find out what the scriptures really say is to collect the ancient manuscripts, all right? Okay, point one, we have no original manuscripts. We have none. We don't have the original Isaiah, we don't have the original John, the original Acts, the original Romans. What we have is copies. And we have copies and copies and copies and copies because once the scripture was given, everybody started copying it. But it was a perfect opportunity for people to change it as it went copying along. And they could put in something here, put in something there, or maybe a scribe made a mistake. Sitting down to copy the whole Old Testament would be a tough job, right? Especially, do you know what they did to help themselves? They took out all the vowels. Took out all the punctuation, all the paragraphs, and all the spaces, and just wrote consonants in big, long strings like that. So scholars have to come back in, and it's not hard to do if you know Hebrew well. But anyway, they wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. In fact, they said Ezra could write the whole Old Testament from memory. He was a scribe, without error. And many of them would write one letter. They were so precise. They would write one letter and wash their pen and write another letter because they didn't want to change one single letter. But there were some who were more careless than that. Through the years of history, we have had scholars that are working in a field that is known as lower criticism. That's just what they call it. Who have collected and studied all the groupings of these various manuscripts. And they have come down basically to two groups of manuscripts. One group, our English Bible and all the rest of the Bibles come down basically to, and they're very, very similar. But these two groups of manuscripts, one of them has produced the King James and the other has produced all of the other modern translations. That second group that's produced all the modern translations has had the benefit of all the years of study since 1611 when this came out. 1611, yeah, when this King James came out. And in those 300 years, there have been many other manuscripts found, which we now know were the better manuscripts, because there's a science of comparing them. They know, for example, if you find two manuscripts and one makes something very difficult, like one manuscript says, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. And this manuscript family says it's easier for a thread to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. Which is the right one? The camel has to be right. Because a scribe would change a camel to a thread, but a scribe would never change a thread to a camel. So one of the laws of lower criticism is you always take the more difficult rendering, because you assume people would try to make it easier, not harder. So there are many, many principles that they use in the study of lower criticism. And what they've come up with is these two families of manuscripts. The King James was based upon the best available stuff in 1611. But now the stuff that the NAS and others are based upon, the NIV, is now manuscripts that are older than the King James manuscripts. And the further back you get, in most cases, the purer you're going to be, right? So that's why from time to time we say that the better manuscripts indicate such and such. And the newer manuscripts have the benefit of all that was in the other set and all that's been added to that since that time. And you can thank the Lord that there are men who spend their whole life just fussing around with these manuscripts.